The moment the words came out of my father's mouth, I felt something inside me crack in a way I didn't even know was possible. Tamari sister successful are responsible high. Wisi koi help ki zarurat nahi hoti. Tum jays logan ko harbat par sahara chehai hoda high. He didn't even try to soften it, didn't blink, didn't hesitate, just said it, as if he were making a casual observation about the weather, while I stood there holding the bills that were drowning me, hoping for even the smallest bit of support. And the worst part, my sister was right behind him, pretending to act humble but smiling in that tiny, smug way she does when she thinks no one notices. I swear I could feel my hands shaking. Tell me, if you were standing there, listening to your own father say you were basically a failure compared to your sister, would you have kept calm? Because I didn't. I looked him right in the eye and asked myself whether I was really that pathetic, or if I had simply allowed everyone around me to believe I was someone I wasn't. And that moment, I think, was when everything that followed truly began. Was I wrong for what I did later? Tumlog comment Kark Batana. Let me start from the beginning. I'm the younger child in a family where the golden child was chosen before I even knew what that word meant. My sister Aisha is 3 years older than me. From the moment she topped her school exams, she became the model child. Straight A student, disciplined, organized, poised, polite, everything a perfect daughter should be, at least from my parents' perspective. And me, I was the messy one, the creative one, the emotional one, the one who liked stories, writing, sketching, and anything that wasn't considered real work. Growing up, my sister would get applause for scoring 97, and I'd get lectures for scoring 86. She'd get a reward for winning a debate competition, and I'd get compared to her because I preferred the art room over the stage. By the time I turned 15, I had memorized every line my parents used to praise her. Aisha never gives us any stress. Aisha always knows what she's doing. Aisha is so responsible. Aishka di my boat tes high? Why can't you learn something from her? And maybe, in some twisted way I tried to. I tried to copy her seriousness, her discipline, her way of maintaining everything like a miniature army general. But copying someone else's personality is like trying to wear a shirt that doesn't belong to you. It never fits right. I was always just me. And for my family, that was never enough. Time passed and Aisha became exactly what everyone expected. Corporate job at a big firm, fancy salary, perfect engagement, picture perfect life on Instagram. And me, I worked at a small design studio doing freelance on the side, trying to build a career that no one took seriously. My salary wasn't huge, but I loved my work. I loved creating things. But in my family, passion didn't matter if it didn't sound respectable. Every time I visited home, my father asked the same question. Kab Sikoj responsibility. Kab Sudroj. And every time, Aisha would be there, smiling with her polished manners, pretending to care, pretending to advise me, pretending to be the perfect sister who was worried about me. That fake concern felt like poison. Fast forward to the day everything blew up. I had been struggling financially for a few months. Freelance projects had slowed down, the studio cut hours because the market was down, and my savings were bleeding out faster than I could earn. Rent, utilities, groceries, it was all piling up. I didn't want to ask anyone for help. But after weeks of stress and sleepless nights, I swallowed my pride and went back home to talk to my parents. I rehearsed what I was going to say maybe 100 times. I wasn't asking for a handout. I wanted a small loan, just enough to get me through the next 2 months. I planned to pay every rupee back once my contract work picked up. I walked into the house that day hoping for understanding. What I got instead was humiliation. My father listened to me with a blank face while I explained everything. I told him I was managing, but things were tight. I told him I wasn't being irresponsible, the economy had slowed down and clients were paying late. I told him I needed temporary help, nothing more. Aisha sat on the couch scrolling through her phone like she was watching entertainment. My mother gave me that worried look mothers give, but didn't say anything. And then my father leaned back, folded his arms, and said the sentence that burned itself into my memory forever. Tamari sister successful are responsible high. Wiskoi help ki zerurat nahe hoti. Tumbas zail karna jate ho. That was when I felt the humiliation turn into something sharper. Anger, betrayal, exhaustion. Everything mixing together in a way that made my chest feel like it was going to explode. And then, as if that wasn't enough, he added, Tamari kamion humaisha re g, ikberto kuchprove karo. I wanted to scream. But instead I turned around, walked out of the room, and left the house without saying another word. When I got home, I broke down. I cried harder than I had in years. But crying wasn't going to change anything. That night, something in me shifted permanently. I wasn't going to be the punching bag of my own family anymore. And I definitely wasn't going to let them keep believing I was useless. I decided that if no one was going to give me a chance, I was going to make my own. The next month, I worked like a machine. I took on every freelance project I could find, branding, web design, poster design, invitations, everything. I barely slept. Coffee became my best friend. I even took a temporary teaching gig to fill the gaps. Slowly, money started coming in. Slowly, I managed to stabilize things. Slowly, I felt myself standing a little taller. But I didn't tell my family anything. No updates, no explanations. Nothing. They didn't deserve to know. Then one day, out of nowhere, my sister called me. Her voice sounded sweet, suspiciously sweet. "Hey, listen, I need help with something," she said. I almost laughed at the irony. "Miss, I don't need anyone's help calling me for assistance." I didn't interrupt her though. I let her explain. Turns out, she had been put in charge of presenting a huge marketing proposal to her company's board. And she messed it up. She messed it up badly. Her design team failed to deliver on time, her concepts were weak, and the board rejected her draft. She had one last chance to fix it within a week, or she'd lose her chance at a major promotion she'd been bragging about for months. And now, she needed me. The irresponsible failure. The lesser sibling. The burden. She needed me to fix her project and basically save her job. I stayed quiet for a moment, just letting the satisfaction settle in. She sounded desperate, panicked even. She didn't sound like the perfect daughter now. She sounded human weak. Needing help. But I didn't say yes immediately. I asked her, "Dad Sipucha, you're the successful one. You don't need help, right?" She went silent. And in that silence, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Power. The dynamic had shifted. She tried to act normal again and said, "Please, I really need this. You're good at this stuff. Just this one time." And honestly, even though I was angry, I still agreed to meet her. Not out of loyalty, not out of sibling affection. I agreed because something in my gut told me this situation was going to be bigger than I realized. So the next day, she came over with her laptop, files, and a face full of stress wrinkles. She started explaining the project, but the moment I opened her work, I realized it was a disaster. Sloppy design, inconsistent branding, disorganized content, like someone had rushed through the entire thing without understanding a single requirement. She sat there nervously watching me, hoping I wouldn't call out her incompetence. But I didn't. I simply asked questions, took notes, and tried to understand the scope. Fixing this would take at least 40 hours, and she expected it for free. Of course, before I continue, let me stop here and ask you, honestly, what would you do in my place? Imagine the same father who insulted you, the same sister who always acted superior, suddenly crawling back to ask you for help. Would you help them, or would you walk away and let them face the consequences of their own arrogance? Tell me in the comments, what would you have done? Because this is exactly where I was stuck. I could help her prove my worth and maybe regain some dignity, or I could do nothing and watch karma handle the rest. I want to know your thoughts before I tell you what I did next. And now the story continues. I didn't give her an answer right away. I looked at the files, then at her, and said, "I'll let you know tomorrow." She left looking uneasy, probably because she'd never seen me so calm and unreadable before. That night I lay awake thinking. A part of me wanted revenge, not dramatic revenge, but the kind where someone finally learns a lesson. Another part of me wanted validation, wanted to show that my work, my passion had value. And a small part of me, the part that still believed in family, wanted to help because I didn't like seeing her panic. But then I remembered my father's words. Tamari's sister successful are responsible high. Wusikoi help kizaroratna hihoti. The sentence repeated in my mind like a broken record. The next morning, I made my decision. And that decision changed everything. My relationship with my sister, my parents, and even my own life trajectory. But what happened next? What really happened when I told her my terms? What she tried to hide from me, how things got worse, and how the situation exploded into a family war. That's something I'm going to tell you in part 2. When I woke up the next morning, the weight of the decision I had to make felt heavier than anything I'd carried in years. It wasn't just about helping my sister fix her project. It was about everything that had built up over the years, every comparison, every insult. Every time my achievements were dismissed like they were small toys, while hers were treated like trophies. I stared at my ceiling for a long moment, replaying the way she had looked at me the day before, the panic in her eyes, the desperation in her voice, the shakiness she tried so hard to hide. For once, the golden child wasn't shining. For once she needed me. And for once I had the choice, the control, to decide what happened next. I didn't rush to call her. I made myself coffee, sat at my workspace, opened my own projects, and tried to pretend the world wasn't twisting itself into something new. But I couldn't focus. My mind kept returning to the same thought. If I help her, she gets her promotion, continues shining, continues being the daughter who can do no wrong. And I would go back to being invisible in my own family. But if I don't help, her world breaks a little. She faces failure. She faces consequences. And maybe for the first time, my parents would have to face reality, that their perfect daughter wasn't flawless after all. But then there was the third option. The most dangerous one. The one I hadn't let myself think about clearly. What if I helped her, but on my own terms? Not silently, not quietly, not as the ignored sibling doing unpaid labor, but as a professional, as someone whose skills have value, as someone who deserved credit, as someone who wasn't going to bow their head anymore. And that thought, that one small spark, began turning into a fire. I finally messaged her and told her to come over in the evening. She replied instantly with a simple, "Thank you," but even in those 2 words I could sense the relief dripping through the screen. She arrived around 6 p.m., clutching her laptop and a bag of snacks like she was offering peace in the form of processed carbohydrates. She sat across from me, waiting for me to start talking. I didn't entertain small talk. I didn't ask how her day was. I didn't pretend this situation was normal. I simply said, "Before I do anything, we need to set terms." I could practically see her flinch. She tried to recover quickly, smiling politely. "Yeah, of course, what kind of terms?" I didn't let her wiggle out of the discomfort. "I'll fix your project, I'll redesign everything, I'll rebuild the entire presentation. But I'm not doing it for free, and I'm not doing it secretly. If you want my help, I want fair compensation, and I want full acknowledgement that this work is mine." The expression on her face changed in slow motion, from shock to confusion to disbelief, and finally to something that looked dangerously close to irritation. For a moment she forgot her perfect, polished persona. "You're seriously asking me to pay you?" "I'm your sister, and I'm not your unpaid intern," I replied calmly. She opened her mouth, closed it again, then crossed her arms. "I didn't expect this from you." "Well," I said, "I didn't expect to be insulted by my father for simply needing temporary support. But here we are." For a long, tense minute she said nothing. She stared at my table, her jaw tightening, her proud persona struggling against the reality of her situation. But in the end, desperation is a powerful motivator, and she needed me more than she wanted to admit. "Fine," she said quietly. "How much?" That was the moment I realized things were shifting. She wasn't talking as the perfect daughter now. She wasn't talking as the superior sibling. She was talking as a client who needed a professional. I told her my rate. She didn't argue. She simply nodded, opened her laptop, and began explaining the details. For the next 2 hours I dissected her project piece by piece. And the deeper I went, the more I realized how catastrophic it really was. This wasn't just bad work, this was embarrassing. No branding logic, no coherence, no emotional appeal. It looked like someone tried throwing every idea at the wall without checking if it even matched the company's actual goals. I couldn't believe she had submitted this to her board. How did she even get this far? Was it talent? Or was it the same privilege that had made my life harder growing up? She watched me work with a mix of awe and unease, like she was seeing me for the first time. At one point she said, "You're really good at this." Her tone wasn't mocking, it wasn't pitying, it was genuine, and for a split second, I felt something soften inside me. But then I reminded myself that compliments mean nothing if they come only when someone desperately needs something from you. She stayed until late, and even though she tried not to, I could see her exhaustion. The perfect daughter wasn't perfect anymore, and watching her crack felt like watching the first domino in a long chain fall. When she left that night, I looked at her disappearing figure and thought, this is not going to end the way she thinks it will. The next 5 days were hell for me. I worked almost non-stop on her project, polishing every slide, every graphic, every layout, every detail. I crafted a deck so sharp, so visually cohesive, so strategically built, that even I was shocked at how well it turned out. Meanwhile, Aisha checked in every few hours, her voice filled with a mix of gratitude and guilt. She didn't say it outright, but I knew she was terrified. Failure wasn't something she had experienced before. And the thought that her first big failure might be public, career-damaging, that would break her entire persona. A day before the final submission, she came over again. She watched me finalize the animations and transitions. Thank you, she said softly. I know things haven't been great between us, but I really appreciate this. I didn't respond, not because I wanted to be rude, but because I didn't know how to feel. Gratitude from her felt foreign, strange, almost suspicious. But then she added, I'll tell Dad about your help. I'll tell him you did everything. I froze. There it was. The moment I had been waiting for my entire life. Not her gratitude, but the possibility that for the first time, my parents might see me as someone capable, someone valuable, someone worthy of pride. But then I remembered how easily they dismissed me before, how easily they put me down, how easily they chose her over me every single time. A part of me didn't want their validation anymore. A part of me wanted freedom from this cycle completely. But I still nodded and said, make sure you do. She promised she would. The next day, she presented her project. I didn't hear from her until late evening, when she called me screaming with joy. They loved it. The board praised her. The CEO complimented her strategic clarity. She was almost in tears telling me how amazing the response was. And for a moment, a very small moment, I felt proud. Proud that I had done something life-changing for someone. Even if that someone was the sister who had overshadowed me for years. She said she'd come home and tell Mom and Dad everything. I waited and waited. And when I finally got a message from her, it wasn't what I expected. It was a picture of her standing with her team, holding a certificate of excellence for her, outstanding presentation and innovative design. The caption read, hard work pays off. So grateful for the opportunity. Couldn't have done this without my amazing team. Her team, not me. No mention of me. No credit. Nothing. She posted it on LinkedIn, Instagram, WhatsApp status, everywhere. My chest tightened. Heat crawled up my neck. My hands began to shake. She had taken the work I poured my soul into and claimed it as her own. Again. Just like she always had. Just like everyone expected her to. I wanted to scream, cry, throw something. But instead I sat down, closed my eyes, and let the betrayal sink deep into my bones. A few hours later, my parents called me. I picked up, hoping maybe, Aisha told them the truth. My father's voice echoed through the phone, full of pride. Aisha ni bohat kamal kardia. Promotion milgaya is, tum siko is. Deko ka zimadar banti hai. I didn't say a word. Not because I was shocked. They'd always been like this. But because this was the moment I realized something important. I didn't matter to them. Not because I wasn't talented. Not because I wasn't responsible. But because they never wanted to see me. They had already decided who I was. And nothing I did would change that. And that realization changed everything for me. The next day, Aisha came over to celebrate. She brought cake, balloons, even a gift. She walked in smiling like she hadn't just erased my existence from her biggest achievement. She hugged me and said, I knew you'd be happy for me. I looked at her, really looked at her. She was glowing, floating, living in a world where she believed she was the main character and everyone else existed to support her storyline. Something inside me snapped, not in anger but in clarity. I asked her, did you tell Mom and Dad the truth? She froze for a split second, then resumed smiling. I told them I got help. That's enough? That's not the truth, I said. She tried to laugh it off. Come on, it doesn't matter. What matters is I got the promotion. It matters to me, she sighed, irritated. You're being dramatic. You got paid, didn't you? Isn't that enough? Paid. That word hit me like a slap. Money was nothing compared to what she had taken from me. My credit, my recognition, my worth. She hadn't just stolen my work. She had stolen my voice. And I decided right then that I wasn't going to let it happen. Not anymore. I opened my laptop, pulled up the project, and showed her the files, the drafts, the process, the timestamps, the version history, everything that proved the entire project was designed by me from scratch. Aisha's face slowly drained of color. What are you doing? She whispered. I'm sending this to your company, her breath caught. You can't do that. And I will, if you don't fix this. She stared at me, horrified. For the first time in her life, she wasn't in control. I was, and she knew it. She tried to bargain, beg, even cry. She told me she'd lose her job. She told me everything she worked for would collapse. She told me our parents would be ashamed. I listened, and then I said, welcome to my world. She broke down. Completely. And as much as I wanted to feel triumph, all I felt was exhaustion. Years of comparison, humiliation, dismissal. It all sat heavy on my chest. I gave her one chance. One final chance. Tell them, I said. Tell your company the truth. Tell Mom and Dad the truth. Or I will. The next morning, she did it, and the explosion that followed, I wasn't prepared for it. Her company didn't fire her, but they did demote her. She lost the promotion. She lost credibility. Her team lost trust in her. Her managers put her under supervision. Her reputation took a hit so strong it shook her entire identity. My parents were even worse. They blamed me. Of course they did. How could you do this to your sister? You should have helped her quietly. Family doesn't expose family. Aisha tums bohad age high, tum samaj kanai sakti. But this time, I didn't stay silent. I told them everything. The years of comparisons, the insults, her stealing credit, her taking advantage of me. My father tried to speak, but for the first time in my life, I shut him down. I told him I wasn't a child anymore. I told him I wasn't weak. I told him I wasn't going to be their afterthought. And then I walked out, not in anger, in freedom. Months passed. My freelance business grew. I landed bigger clients. I built a portfolio that actually reflected my value. Eventually, I moved to a better apartment, upgraded my workspace, and created a life that belonged to me. Not built on validation, not built on approval, but built on my own terms. My sister and I still talk, but the dynamic is different now. She respects me. She asks instead of demands. She acknowledges my work publicly. She learned her lesson, not because I wanted revenge, but because sometimes people need a mirror held up close enough to see the version of themselves they've been avoiding their whole life. As for my parents, our relationship is distant, but peaceful. They don't interfere in my life anymore. I don't seek their praise anymore. And maybe that's okay. Maybe not all families heal perfectly. Sometimes, they just settle into silence. But me? I'm finally okay. So that's my story, and let me ask you again, was I wrong? Would you have done what I did? Would you have stayed quiet or stood your ground? Tell me in the comments, because honestly, I still wonder if I went too far, or if this was the only way things could have changed.